Did you know that Red Bull could be losing its dominance in F1, and Verstappen is at the center of the storm? What seemed like just another race ended up exposing a deep crisis. McLaren has made a statement, and Red Bull is starting to shake. Before we continue, let's weigh in the comments. Do you think this drop in performance will make Verstappen look for another team? Is this the end of an era for Red Bull? In this video, we'll take an in-depth look at the 2025 Miami Grand Prix, where McLaren not only won but also highlighted a worrying drop in performance for Red Bull. What's happening with Verstappen and his team? Over the past few seasons, Red Bull has built an almost invincible image. With a dominant car and a driver in top form, Max Verstappen has been synonymous with absolute supremacy in Formula One. Each Grand Prix seemed like another extension of his authority, a relentless grind in which the other teams could barely hope for second place. The combination of Adrian Newey's technical direction, the team's strategic aggression, and Verstappen's natural talent had created such effective synergy that many began to talk about a new golden era for Red Bull. Even when small threats appeared, such as the resurgent Ferrari or the intermittent improvements of Mercedes, the Austrian team responded with precise updates, aggressive decisions, and convincing victories. Nothing seemed able to shake them from that rhythm. However, the 2025 season has begun to show unexpected signs. Although the initial results were not alarming, there were worrying nuances in the car's behavior and the team's communication. Small strategic errors, balance issues on certain tracks, and more tense statements from Verstappen began to shatter the image of absolute dominance. The Miami Grand Prix represented the breaking point. What should have been another show of strength turned into a race that exposed the RB21's weaknesses against a McLaren that was not only faster but far more consistent. Verstappen finished fourth, off the podium, behind two McLarens and a Ferrari. Beyond the final result, what was most striking was the difference in pace. The Dutchman crossed the finish line more than 40 seconds behind Oscar Piastri, and throughout the race, he never had the pace to compete for the win. There were no serious errors, no accidents, no visible mechanical problems. The car simply wasn't up to the task. And that, in the world of Formula One, is perhaps the most serious sign a leading team can receive, being overtaken on pure merit. Verstappen's body language after the race also spoke for itself. Subdued frustration, curt answers in interviews, and clear discomfort when talking about the car. He stated that every time he tried to push, the tires would overheat and the car would become unmanageable. A statement that, coming from a driver as meticulous and technical as he is more than a simple complaint. It's a direct warning to his team. And as if that weren't enough, Helmut Marko, the team's sporting advisor, was even more forceful in acknowledging that they are in a critical situation. In his words, the team needs to find a solution immediately, reflecting not only the technical urgency but also the internal pressure that is beginning to build. This context leaves us with a clear but worrying picture. Red Bull is no longer the rival everyone is chasing, but the team that is starting to look sideways, trying to understand when its competitors became faster. And that is a completely new position for them in the Verstappen era. Now that we're clear on how we got to this point, it's time to talk about what's circulating behind the scenes. Rumors, leaks, and signs that indicate Red Bull's slump might not be temporary, and that other teams, especially McLaren, are ready to take center stage. In the wake of the surprising outcome of the Miami Grand Prix, the Formula One paddock has been flooded with rumors, leaks, and theories pointing to a possible total reconfiguration of the balance of power on the grid. What at first seemed like a simple, atypical race has become the epicenter of a wave of speculation that goes far beyond an isolated poor performance by Red Bull. Chatter circulating in the corridors among engineers, team bosses, and specialized journalists suggests that McLaren may have been intentionally hiding some of its true performance in the early races of the season, waiting for the right moment to reveal the full potential of its car. And that moment would have been, precisely, in Miami. This strategy is not new. Throughout the history of F1, several teams have used this type of maneuver to play dumb, reduce media pressure, or simply to prevent their rivals from reacting in time. In this case, McLaren would have arrived at the American street circuit with a fully optimized aerodynamic package, a car that not only found a perfect operating window for the tires but also showed impressive stability at race pace, something Red Bull clearly couldn't match. This theory gains even more strength when considering that, since preseason testing, McLaren had been showing consistent progress, although without results that clearly reflected that progress until now. But the rumors don't stop at the technical level. Some sources close to Red Bull have begun to speak of internal tensions that are affecting not only the car's development but also the team's dynamics. It is mentioned that certain key decisions regarding the RB21's technical direction were not fully agreed upon between the lead engineers and the sporting directors, which would have led to delays in the implementation of crucial improvements. These technical discrepancies add to a tense atmosphere, especially after Adrian Newey announced his departure from Red Bull in 2025, sparking all kinds of theories about internal destabilization within the team. Although Newey's departure is not yet effective, the simple knowledge that his presence already has an expiration date creates an atmosphere of uncertainty, both at the engineering level and in the driver's perception of the project. Alongside these conflicts, reports are emerging that Verstappen is dissatisfied with the team's management in the face of this performance crisis. While he has been cautious in his public statements, paddock sources claim that behind closed doors he has been much more critical and demanding. Some insiders even suggest that the Dutchman has set clear conditions for continuing with the team beyond 2026, especially if the current trend is not quickly reversed. And this is where another key player in these rumors comes in: Ferrari. The Italian team, which has shown significant improvements so far this season, is reportedly willing to offer Verstappen a multi-million-dollar contract to join the team in the near future, with the promise of building the sporting project around him. This flurry of rumors, including McLaren's underperforming performance, a technical crisis at Red Bull, and tempting offers from Ferrari, has set off alarm bells in Milton Keynes. It's no longer just a matter of figuring out how to regain the competitive advantage, but also of preventing this vulnerable situation from turning into a general exodus that would put an end to a cycle of glory that seemed destined to last for many more years. With these rumors on the table, the situation becomes even more delicate. And what follows is key. How is Red Bull reacting to this multiple threat? And what is Max Verstappen's true position regarding the situation, which, without exaggeration, could define the immediate future of his career? Within Red Bull, the immediate response to the storm of rumors has been a desperate effort to maintain calm in the public eye, while internally the team's entire technical, strategic, and communications apparatus is being accelerated to address one of the biggest crises since the beginning of its dominant era with Max Verstappen. Executives have issued statements attempting to project confidence, reaffirming their long-term commitment to the project and assuring that the difficulties encountered in recent races are only temporary adjustments. However, that narrative is beginning to ring hollow for those who closely observe what is happening within the team's internal structure. There is a clear difference between the words and official statements and the tension felt in the garages and development meetings. Red Bull's recent decisions show that they are willing to take drastic measures to retain Verstappen and regain lost ground. According to reliable reports, part of the technical team leading the development of the RB21 has been restructured, reassigning responsibilities and urgently prioritizing the creation of a new aerodynamic package better suited to the most demanding circuits on the calendar. Pressure has also been increased on key component suppliers in an attempt to accelerate updates that were planned for later in the season. These actions reveal that Red Bull is not only aware of its vulnerability, but also understands that its window of time to reverse the situation is extremely limited. But perhaps the most delicate factor in this entire situation is the position of Max Verstappen. He is not simply a star driver. He is the center of the Red Bull project. Since his promotion in 2016, the entire team has revolved around his talent, his driving style, and his ambition to become a legend in the sport. Technical decisions, race strategies, and even engineering hires have been designed to maximize his performance. Therefore, any sign of discontent from Verstappen cannot be taken lightly. In recent weeks, his statements have taken on a different tone. Although he hasn't openly stated that he is considering leaving the team, he has emphasized the need to maintain a competitive environment and how frustrating it is not to be able to fight for victory in every race. Behind these seemingly moderate words, many read a warning. Verstappen, who has a contract with Red Bull until 2028, knows that his market value is extremely high and that any team would be willing to completely reorganize its structure to have him. And while the exit clause in his contract is complex, there has also been talk of certain performance conditions that, if not met, could open the door for him to leave earlier than planned. This is where the recent proposals reportedly received from Ferrari and Mercedes come into play. Although none of these offers have been officially confirmed, it is known that there is real interest from both teams in building a project tailored to Verstappen, offering him not only financial resources, but also a technical environment completely adapted to his needs. The situation, therefore, is delicate. Red Bull is fighting on several fronts, regaining technical competitiveness, maintaining internal morale, and, above all, convincing its most important driver that continuing to invest in them remains the best possible decision. Adrian Newey's departure has only worsened this situation, as Verstappen deeply trusted his technical vision and ability to solve underlying problems. Now, without that key figure, the Dutchman faces a very complex dilemma: continue leading a team that is beginning to show cracks, or opt for a change of scenery that, although risky, could offer him new opportunities to continue winning championships. With this in mind, it is essential to analyze the possible consequences if this change were to materialize. Because beyond the emotional or symbolic impact, Verstappen's departure would mean a radical transformation for today's Formula One. And that's exactly what we'll address below. If Max Verstappen were to ultimately decide to leave Red Bull, the impact on Formula One would be immediate and profound, with repercussions that would extend beyond the sporting sphere. We're talking about a move that could completely reconfigure the balance of power in the sport, on par with the great milestones that marked the change of eras in the past, such as when Schumacher left Benetton for Ferrari, or when Lewis Hamilton left McLaren for Mercedes. Verstappen not only represents one of the most dominant talents of the modern era, but his presence at Red Bull has been an anchor of stability, a guarantee of results, and a fundamental commercial pillar for the team. His departure would open a huge wound not only in the competitive arena, but also in the team's institutional image. For Red Bull, losing Max would mean facing a reconstruction that goes beyond replacing a driver. His departure is likely to also trigger a domino effect affecting the team's other key personnel, from track engineers to strategists and analysts who have worked closely with him for years. These highly specialized profiles often follow the driver with whom they have built a relationship of trust, which could further weaken Red Bull's technical structure. Furthermore, in terms of sponsorship, Verstappen is a high-caliber commercial asset with a direct impact on marketing contracts, media exposure, and international expansion, especially in markets where his popularity is massive, such as the Netherlands, Belgium, and much of Northern Europe. All of this would be unpredictable. From a competitive perspective, a change of team would have a seismic effect on the grid. Imagine Verstappen at Ferrari. It would mean that the Scuderia, already one of the most resourceful and prestigious teams in the history of motorsport, would gain not only a reigning champion, but also the most complete driver of his generation. This would reshuffle internal hierarchies, likely force a restructuring of the current lineup, and put enormous pressure on other top teams like Mercedes, McLaren, or even Aston Martin, whose aspirations of competing at the highest level would be threatened. Furthermore, Verstappen's signing would not be an isolated move. It would be accompanied by a full package of technical demands, car development, and contractual guarantees that would transform any team that welcomes him. The psychological impact on the rest of the grid would also have to be considered. For many drivers, sharing the track with Verstappen already represents a technical and mental challenge, but if he were to change teams and become immediately competitive, it would send a clear message to the rest of the paddock. It's not just the car that makes the difference, but the driver's ability to elevate the project he joins. This narrative, which has favored Red Bull as an organization for years, would go on to nourish the image of the team that manages to convince Verstappen. The change would also affect the contract negotiations of other drivers, many of whom are waiting to see how the situation unfolds before making decisions about their futures. Even young talents from academies like Mercedes Junior or Ferrari Driver Academy could see their plans altered by a move of this magnitude. Finally, on a more general level, the championship itself would enter a new phase. Verstappen's departure from Red Bull would end, symbolically and practically, a cycle that dominated Formula One for several seasons. It would open the door to greater competitiveness, perhaps a more open fight between several teams, which would be positive from a spectacle perspective. But it could also generate a new monopoly if the team that signs him manages to quickly adapt to his style and make him the central axis of its project. Either way, the championship as we know it would not be the same, and fans would have more than enough reason to closely follow every move in the driver market. That said, it's crucial that we understand what the next step in this story could be, because what happens in the coming months will set the pace for the entire next era of F1. What scenarios are being considered, and how are teams preparing for a potential total shakeup of the current system? That's precisely what we'll address in the next section. As the season progresses, the pressure intensifies not only on the track but also in the offices. What was once a mere whisper in the paddock corridors has now become a topic of daily analysis among executives, analysts, and specialized journalists. In this delicate situation, the next moves will be decisive and could redefine the Formula One landscape for the immediate future. F1 insiders agree that the driver market is on the verge of a boiling point, and what happens to Max Verstappen will trigger a chain reaction involving multiple teams, contracts, and long-term strategies. In the coming weeks, Red Bull is expected to continue to pressure Verstappen and his entourage to close a deal that is not only financially attractive but also guarantees structural improvements within the team. This ranges from consolidating his position as the undisputed number one to directly influencing technical decisions and the selection of his teammate. However, recent internal conflicts, coupled with the departure of key figures such as Adrian Newey, have weakened the sense of absolute dominance the team used to project. This loss of stability has opened a window of opportunity for other teams, especially Ferrari, to intensify their offensive. And it's not just a monetary issue. What's being negotiated is a tailor-made project, a technical and human environment that meets the expectations of a mature world champion. At the same time, Ferrari is emerging as the most aggressive and strategic player in this game. The signals they've given from Maranello in recent months point to serious investment in the sporting, technical, and financial areas. The incorporation of engineers from other teams, the restructuring of its aerodynamics department, and the reinforcement of its simulation team are all pieces of a puzzle that points to one thing: becoming world champions again. And if they need to sign the most dominant driver of the moment, they won't hesitate to do so. In this context, talks with Verstappen aren't just a possibility, they're a priority. The offer isn't just financial, it's a commitment to internal transformation that could be tempting enough to break the historic link with Red Bull. At the same time, other teams like Mercedes, although more discreet, aren't out of the running. Toto Wolff has hinted on more than one occasion that he considers Max a key player in rebuilding his winning project after Hamilton's departure and Russell's ups and downs. Even McLaren, with its recent resurgence, could attempt something bold if circumstances allow. All of this makes Verstappen the epicenter of the market, and any move he makes will be closely watched by teams, sponsors, and fans alike. As for the timing of decisions, everything indicates that the European summer will be the turning point. Traditionally, it's at this stage that the most advanced negotiations begin to leak to the press and teams begin finalizing deals for next year. If Red Bull manages to convince Verstappen before then, they can avoid an even bigger internal crisis. But if doubts persist and external offers continue to strengthen, we could be on the verge of one of the most shocking transfers in the history of modern Formula One. With all this on the table, it's clear that the Max Verstappen situation isn't just a story of rumors and eye-catching headlines. It's a turning point for F1, a juncture where personal ambitions, team strategies, commercial interests, and the pursuit of sporting dominance intersect. But now that we understand where this complex scenario could evolve, it's time to analyze how this situation could alter the relationship between Verstappen and his current team, Red Bull, and what implications this could have for the rest of the championship.